Have you ever stopped to think about our planet as this incredibly complex machine? Almost like a biological computer running on its own special operating system. Well, that's exactly what we're getting into today. Think of this as the user manual for Earth, a way to understand how it all actually works.
I mean, that's a huge question, right? But here's the thing. Just like any super complex piece of tech, it's all built on a few core principles. And once you get those, everything else just kind of clicks into place. So let's dive in. All right, so to understand the planet's whole operating system, we've got to start with the most basic piece of the puzzle, the core software, if you will, that runs pretty much everything. And that's called an ecosystem. Now, to make this idea really stick, let's just look at a simple pond. I mean, it might look peaceful and quiet, but it's actually a bustling, totally self-sufficient little world. You've got the sun beaming down energy, plants turning it into food, and this whole web of creatures, frogs, fish, flies, you name it, all living and interacting in this one tiny space. And here we have the official definition. But the real key word here, the one I want you to focus on, is interacting. It's this constant dance between the living things, the biotic stuff, and the non-living things, like water and sunlight, the abiotic, that makes the entire system tick. So this diagram here, this gives us the basic blueprint. See? Everything in an ecosystem falls into one of two buckets. Biotic, which just means living, and abiotic, which means non-living. The health of the whole system, literally everything, depends on the delicate balance between these two sides. Okay, so within that living biotic community, it is all about the flow of energy. It all starts with the producers, think plants, that create energy straight from the sun. Then you've got the consumers, the animals who get their energy by eating. And finally, you have the most crucial cleanup crew, the decomposers, who break down everything that dies and recycle the nutrients. And this illustration right here shows that flow perfectly. This is the food chain. And you can think of it as the fundamental power grid for all of life. It's what determines who eats who and how energy gets passed up from one level to the next. So let's just trace it for a second. The sun powers the plants. A grasshopper comes along and eats the plants. Then a mouse eats the grasshopper. A snake eats the mouse, and it goes all the way up to the top predator, the eagle. But it doesn't stop there. When the eagle eventually dies, fungi go to work, breaking it down and returning all those valuable nutrients right back to the soil to start the whole cycle over again. Pretty amazing. But here's the really crucial part. This energy transfer, it's not very efficient. At each step up the chain, only about 10% of the energy makes it to the next level. The rest is just lost as heat. And that's why there are always way more plants than plant eaters and way more plant eaters than predators. This pyramid shape isn't just a nice graphic. It's a fundamental law of energy in nature. Okay, so we get the system now, but let's talk about what actually fuels it. All of these ecosystems, from the tiniest pond to the biggest ocean, they all run on our planet's natural resources. To put it really simply, these are the planet's raw materials. They're the things that are here completely independent of us. They are the absolute essential building blocks, the energy source, for every single ecosystem on this Earth. And these resources, they basically come in two flavors. On one side, you have your renewable resources, things like sunlight and wind. They replenish super quickly, so they're essentially infinite. But on the other side, you have non-renewable ones, like coal and oil. These are finite. Once we use them up, they are gone for good. And that distinction, right there, is one of the most important things to grasp when we talk about our modern environmental challenges. I mean, just take a second and look at this list. Clean air to breathe, fresh water to drink, fertile soil to grow our food. These aren't just commodities, They are the absolute, non-negotiable foundations of our survival and our entire global economy. 2%. What do you think that number is? Well, it's the shockingly small fraction of all the water on Earth that's actually fresh water, the water that we and pretty much all land-based ecosystems need to survive. Wow, kind of puts the value of that resource into perspective, doesn't it? Okay, so we have the system, the ecosystems, and we have the fuel, the resources. But what happens when that system gets put under stress? Well, that's when we run into what are called environmental hazards. And we can pretty much group these hazards into two main categories. You've got your traditional hazards, things like contaminated water, which are often tied to poverty and a lack of infrastructure. And then you have modern hazards, like industrial pollution, which are basically the byproducts of all our technological development. Now, what's so important to understand is that these hazards, they don't exist in a vacuum. Nope, they're often connected in a chain. So for instance, you can have a physical event, like a massive flood,
Which can then directly cause a biological one. Those floodwaters can get into drinking supplies, leading to outbreaks of nasty diseases. It's this dangerous chain reaction where one problem literally creates another. And this leads us to a really critical and frankly deeply unjust idea called the double burden. What it means is that the world's most vulnerable people are often getting hit from both sides. They're facing risks from a lack of development, like unsafe water, while at the very same time facing risks from modern industrial pollution. And this map just lays that point out so clearly. It's showing death rates from indoor air pollution, a classic traditional hazard. You can see immediately how this burden is not shared equally. The highest rates, all that red, are concentrated in developing nations. It's stark visual proof of who is carrying the heaviest environmental load. Okay, let's pull all of these threads together now. We've talked about the planet's operating system, we've talked about the fuel it runs on, and the hazards that are threatening it. So now let's connect the dots and figure out where we fit into all this. If there is one crucial takeaway from all of this, it's this. These are not separate issues. The health of our ecosystems, the availability of our resources, and our exposure to hazards are all deeply, deeply interconnected parts of one single global system. The health of a forest is tied to the freshwater supply, and both are threatened by pollution. It really is all one big story. And that brings us to the final and I think the most important question. This isn't just some abstract system that's operating out there somewhere. We are an active and incredibly influential part of it. Everything we do impacts the system, and in turn, the health of that system directly impacts us. So the real question becomes, now that we understand the basics of how this whole thing works, what's our role going to be?